Hello and welcome to my storybook cottage, where I'm going to be talking about research today, which sounds boring but absolutely isn't. I do a lot of research because I do a lot of historical work, mostly fiction of course, but sometimes non-fiction. I've done one non-fiction book, which is this one, Charlatan, which was about a very dodgy, weird mid-19th century scam artist, mesmerist, pretended to be a doctor but he wasn't. When I first discovered him, researching something else, I thought, oh, I could write a novel about him. And then I thought, no, that'd be a waste. He's just too good. It's just too weird. I'm going to write non-fiction. And when I was writing, I had to do a lot of research. I usually went to the state library. I did a lot of stuff online, but I did buy some books. And one of the books I bought was this one, The Phantom Fenians of New South Wales, which, look, it's very complicated, but Thomas Guthrie Carr was kind of peripherally associated with this social movement. So that was one of the books I bought for that one. And then A Gentleman's Garden, which I mentioned before. Again, I had to go and do a lot of research in the state library and do other various things, but one of the things I did do was buy books, and one of the books I bought was this one, True Patriots All, which is a bunch of broadsides, beautifully presented. There were some lovely pictures involved, a bunch of broadsides from very early colonial Sydney. So I used to use that when I was writing Gentleman's Garden. And then for this book, A Dark Mountain, The Dark Mountain is based on a true story about a family called the Atkinson family, who were very heavily involved with very early colonial Australia. And basically this is about Charlotte Atkinson. Her mother was also called Charlotte, and her mother published she wrote the first children's book that was published in Australia, A Mother's Offering to Her Children. So I obviously had to read that for the novel, and I bought that, and then I bought Settlers and Convicts, which was, around the time that the Atkinson family were there in that period. Throsby Park, an account of the Throsby family in Australia. They were neighbours of the Atkinson family. History of the Berrima district, that's where the Atkinsons were living originally. Notes and sketches of New South Wales during a residence in the colony from 1839 to 1844. So that was around the time that I'm writing about. So I got that. This is similar, Blanche, an Australian diary, 1858 to 1861, a little bit later, but still relevant. Wallara, A History in Pictures. Again, the Atkinson family used to live around there, so I got that. Sydney in the 1850s. Again, around the 1840s is when I was writing about, so that was very relevant. And The Old Charm of Penrith. Again, there was a bit of a connection with Penrith to the Atkinson family. So all of those books that I actually bought to do research for all those other books that I wrote, all of these books were got from a particular bookshop in Katoomba called Mr. Pickwick's. And it's the most fantastic place to go if you're going to do research. If you think, I'm going to need a book about 19th century schools in Australia, then you will go in there and you will find something, I guarantee it. Mr. Pickwick's is in the MacArthur Arcade building. You just descend a long flight of stairs to the basement, and at the bottom is a huge space stuffed with books. There are lots of antique and vintage books, and there's a whole section on the Blue Mountains. There's even a large section devoted to Papua New Guinea, which is nice because I grew up there. There's also a section called Books for Writers, which has a really quirky selection of books. And then there's the massive Australian history section. Captain John Piper, I could have so done with this one when I was researching The Gentleman's Garden. If you're interested in an old Sydney suburb, you can probably find a book about it here. There's a very well-stocked children's section, and lo and behold, my books are in it. If I was still studying medieval history, I would so get this book. But it's not just my books that I research. Whenever I need anything new in my life, I also do a little bit of research about that. And I need some new plants. This Daphne has been like this for at least 3 years. I don't know what's wrong with it, except that a long time ago it was run over by a truck. I've been feeding it and watering it and giving it all sorts of love and care, and it's just not, I don't know, thriving. So I think I'm going to have to replace it. The other two Daphnes nearby are doing so well. They obviously don't mind a spot that's quite shady and dry, but occasionally gets hit by enormously hot sun. So to find the right kind of replacement, which isn't a Daphne in case there's some kind of anti-Daphne disease in the soil, I'm going to do some research at the Leura Gardens Festival. Every October in Leura, 7 private gardens open to the public to raise money for the local hospital. This year, one of the open gardens is called St Anne's. There are hydrangeas planted under the trees in this garden, but I don't think they'll work for me. It's too dry. And the canthus are too big. Cordialis might work. I once planted that and it sort of worked. And this mystery plant, I don't know what it is, but that looks great. This next garden is called Ewanrig, and the owners have solved the shade problem by planting lots of azaleas. And when the azaleas are this beautiful, you can't blame them. They've also planted some lily of the valley, which might be an option, I suppose. You have to get your ticket scanned at each of the gardens. This one's called Cherrydell, and part of it was designed by the famous Leura landscape gardener Paul Sorensen, whom I've mentioned before. What I particularly like about this garden is the combination of native and exotic plants, like the gum trees combined with the azaleas. There's even a special little native section in the garden, and there are some beautiful Australian magpie sculptures. But the rest of the garden is classic English style, right down to the forget-me-nots, which actually are a bit of a weed around here, as are the bluebells, but they are beautiful. This ground cover really interests me. I don't know what it is, but it's nice. And I have my own Chinese forget-me-nots in the garden, but they are not tough enough to be surviving amongst all these bluebells. Another garden originally designed by Paul Sorensen is the Braes, and it is enormous. When you look at all the terracing and dry stone walls, you can really feel Sorensen's guiding hand. The plantings give me iris envy because even though I have my own iris, it never seems to flower. I don't know what this is, but it probably needs a lot of moisture. There's also a stand of Wallamai pines, which were discovered about 30 years ago in a valley not very far from here. They're prehistoric plants dating back about 200 million years and were thought to be extinct. Honestly, this garden is so beyond my wildest dreams. It's kind of not really given me much to work with, but I enjoyed it anyway. At the next garden, Karula, you have to disinfect the soles of your shoes before entering. It's a very interesting mixture. There's a bit of a Japanese vibe, as well as a traditional English style section. with a stunning clivia that I love. And then there's an area where the owners are trying to regenerate native rainforest, which is wonderful. There's another Wallamai pine here. And a beautiful waratah. The other gardens certainly have their moments, but I don't find much else in the way of possible Daphne replacements. One has a combination of woodruff and another plant that I already have, but it isn't going too well right now. Another has native violet ground cover, but that's not quite what I need. This acacia is lovely, but it's a sun lover. I didn't find quite what I wanted, but next week I'm going to another garden and I'm also going to some nurseries, so the search is still on. Meanwhile, happy researching.